Thank you for coming this afternoon. My name is Stephen Murray. I am a board member here at the Society for International Development, Washington chapter. And today's a real pleasure because I get to kind of both have this professional and personal moment because Eli is a friend of almost 20 years. In addition to being a friend, I've actually been a student of Eli. I've been through his workshop, and in my professional career, which is marketing emerging and frontier market investment opportunities to investors, I benefited greatly from taking his perspective and trying to think as to how we can really focus our presentations from our audience's perspective. So with that, I will leave it to Eli to give you this special sauce. Thank you for coming today.
20 years, you know the special sauce. Well, thank you, Stephen, and thanks, everyone. I know your time is valuable, so I'll jump right in. Why are we here? We're here because all of us have a problem, which is that every single person in this room, myself included, we communicate all the time. We're communicating to friends, to family, to coworkers, to leadership, to government officials, to possible partners. All day, every day, we are communicating with others. And some of those communications aren't critical, but some are. There are moments where we are trying to convince someone to do something. Join my organization, partner with us, give us funding, right? Support this new initiative. And no matter how good we are at communication or think we are at communication, more often than not, it feels like, man, that conversation should have gone better. That presentation should have gone better. This made so much sense. Why didn't they do the thing I wanted them to do? So we know that a lot is at stake when we communicate, and yet we don't always get the results from our communications. So today we're going to talk about what's actually going wrong, and more importantly, how do we fix it? So the title of this was, I think, Beyond TED Talks. I will mention TED Talks, but this is actually beyond TED Talks in the sense that this is all communication. This is personal, professional, whether you're up on a stage keynoting, whether you're sending an important email. Everything I'll talk about will be relevant. So, are you guys in the right room? Good. Now, a couple of ground rules. The first is all of you should have in front of you or on your chair one of these. Grab it. This is the campfire around which we will sit for the next 45 minutes. All the important stuff I'm going to say, or most of the important stuff I'm going to say, is on here, so you don't have to take a lot of notes. Although these are your copies, so feel free to write on them if you would like. You can take them home with you. Second ground rule is if you would take your cell phones and set them to airplane mode, or even turn them off. Unless you're expecting a child or some other emergency. If you're willing to do that, there's two reasons. One is the obvious one, which is it's kind of rude if your phone is buzzing or ringing when I'm talking or your peers are engaging here. But there's a more interesting and important reason, more relevant to what we're talking about today, which is when that phone, even if you have it on silent, is in your pocket and it buzzes and you feel it, your attention fractures. And you're even if you don't reach for it, even if you don't answer it, your brain is now going, is that my spouse? Is that my boss? Is that some other important person? Like, should I take it? No, it's probably not this. And you think about it for a couple seconds, and then you're like, no, I'll leave it. And you come back up, and what do you say? What was that? What did I just miss? Where are we? Right? So the attention fractures so easily with the human brain these days. And it's why, I don't know if any of you have children of driving age, you tell them not to text and drive, because the brain cannot actually multitask. It can't do two things that both require thought at the same time. So if you're going to be here for the next 45 minutes, be here. I promise we'll end on time or close to it. You'll be able to go and check email to your heart's content and make phone calls. So, people good with that? Just for the moment, thank you. All right, let me get back to this problem at hand about we communicate all the time, and yet we don't get the results we're looking for. And that matters because we're not communicating just to hear ourselves talk. We're doing it because we're trying to get some sort of a result. But think about the communications that you receive, and take yourself out of the picture. But trainings you've been to, other conferences, this one's actually really good, but other conferences, internal business meetings, and you take a look at the top chart there. On the left-hand side of the page it says Communicating for Action. The question we asked in this survey we did was, thinking broadly about presentations you attend, what percentage would you place in each of the following categories, from this totally sucked to this was outstanding? And I'm guessing no one here is going to be terribly surprised to see that most people said most presentations are mediocre or worse. And just think about that. We accept that. We just go, okay, that's sort of normal. That's fine. Like, I know. Where else would we accept that level of mediocrity? Like, if our finance department got it right 64% of the time, would that be good? Right? No. And yet we accept it. In fact, how many of you have been in that meeting where you sit through the meeting, it's dense, bulleted PowerPoint, whatever, and at the end of it you walk out and you go, that's an hour of my life I'm never going to get back. Now, was the person who did that meeting, who subjected you to that, were they fired immediately after that meeting ended for wasting everyone's time? Of course not. They probably got a pat on the back like, hey, nice job. And then boom, business as usual. We accept this, and it's become just kind of the typical approach. And you see it in the middle of the top of the page. The typical approach is bulleted PowerPoint. And I want to be careful. I'm not actually faulting bulleted PowerPoint here. It is just a tool. It's like a hammer, right? With a hammer, you can build a house, but you can also break your thumb. PowerPoint's the same way. It's actually a great tool when used properly. The problem is most people use it with its defaults, which are like, oh, I can click here, add another slide, click here, add another slide, click here, add another bullet, click here, add chart. And these things get denser and denser. I was flying back to DC last week, and there was someone literally sitting on the plane next to me with sort of T-Rex arms on the little tiny tray, trying not to spill their coffee into it. And they were building a presentation they were clearly going to deliver when they landed. Now, were they taking slides away or were they adding slides? Adding slides. Were they taking bullets away or were they adding bullets? Adding bullets. And the font was getting smaller and smaller to a point where if it was a sound, only dogs could hear it. And I knew that, like, oh, I feel so bad for the people who are going to be on the receiving end of it. I wasn't going to say anything to her because, tight space and all that. Didn't know how violent this person might get. But you see what really is the problem. It's not that it's PowerPoint. It's what we're doing with it. And that's the right-hand side. What it is. It tends to be very dense. Too much information, TMI. Page after page of bullets, of charts, of dense statistics and detail. It's also, as you see the third bullet there, it tends to be very confusing because even if the content is good, it's like, and you've been in these meetings too, where it's like, here's the mission and values, and here's some project we're working on, and here's something about funding, and here's the team. You're like, okay, how does this connect to that? Where are we going here? And you get lost. And at that point, you have two bad options. One is burn a ton of mental energy trying to recreate some structure that your presenter failed to create for you. Or worse, you just go, okay, I'm lost, and you check out and you start to do email under the table. So it's confusing from a topic point of view, but it's also confusing because there tends to be a lot of jargon in presentations. How many of you work at organizations that have some TLAs? 3-letter acronyms. Okay, you see what I just did there though, right? How many of you just burned some of that very limited mental energy, especially as we get toward the end of the day going, what the heck does TLA stand for? And you're guessing. And the first time I do that, you're willing to maybe try and figure it out and go, okay, whatever. The second, third time I do that, or you do that to someone else, they're like, okay, this person's speaking another language, I'm out. So this confusion comes up in a couple of different ways. And the fourth bullet there about who do these presentations tend to be about? The person up on stage or sending you some document or in some way communicating to you, do they tend to talk about themselves and their organization, or do they tend to talk about their audience? Themselves. Let me tell you about my mission. Let me tell you about our history. Let me tell you about some projects we're working on. Let me tell you who else we work with, right? It tends to be me, me, me. And that just gives people a reason to check out because people don't care about you. No offense, right? But they don't. They care about themselves. And I'll get a little more into that in a little bit later. But when we become very sender-oriented in our presentations, which is being driven by good reasons, it's just a bad outcome, it actually ends up making it very difficult for people to get much out of the message. But all of this is leading to that last bullet there, which is unretellable. And this one is critical because the world has changed in a number of ways. And I'll talk 2 or 3 of them today, but one of them specifically is that people no longer make decisions on their own. We've reached a consensus-driven decision-making world where you go in and you meet with somebody, maybe, or a group of people, but here's you, and you end up having some maybe a very good meeting with it's a government official, it's whoever else you're talking to, and they go, hey, thanks, this was great, really appreciated your time, cool. You're like, well, okay, will you do the thing I want you to do? Like, well, I got to go talk to some other people. You're like, crap. So they then go, and now that person is meeting with some other group of 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 people around some conference table. And they're having to retell your story. What's the likelihood that if what they've got is some dense, bulleted, confusing PowerPoint deck, that they're going to be able to retell your story with any degree of fidelity? It's going to be very difficult. And this is a second way the world has changed, although not really. This has kind of always been this way. We're only now just admitting it, is that people do not represent other people's PowerPoint decks. And again, I'm using PowerPoint as the example, Keynote, Prezi, whatever. People don't represent other people's decks when they are in the form of this kind of stuff. Now, all of that means that we are very unlikely to get the action we want, but there is a second, almost worse consequence here when we present poorly or communicate poorly. And this is the next chart there, because we started to think about this, like, well, if my solution, if my idea, if my project, if my organization is really good, like, this is brilliant, what we do or what I'm asking for from you, like, this is amazing. Okay, maybe I'm not a great presenter, but can't you see through my mediocrity to this brilliant idea that I've got, this brilliant solution that I've got? Or are people judging the book by the cover? And you look at the detail on that chart. I don't know how many of you do market research or involved in any research methodology. You know that people tend not to like to answer at the ends of the spectrum. They kind of want to give sort of middle-of-the-road answers. Not so much here. The question was, to what extent does bad messaging contaminate the perception of the solution? Right? How much are people judging the book by the cover? And what you see, yeah, okay, there's 6% there on the left saying no or a small negative impact. But there's fully 94% of people saying, oh yeah, if the message is bad, I assume the solution is bad. I assume the idea is bad. Because here's the thing, if it was really that great, you'd be able to tell a great story. And if you can't, that makes me pretty suspect of what it is you're talking about. So people form a correlation between the thing being messaged and the message. And in fact, I won't get into it, but they also form a correlation to the messenger. They're judging you. What it all leads to there on the right side of the center of the page, what it does, this failure to drive action, right? So whether we're in business, we want a customer to buy, whether we want someone to support with funds, whether we want employees to buy into a project that we're starting, whatever it may be, if we don't communicate as clearly as we know we could, or as powerfully as we know we should, we don't get the outcome that we're looking for. And sometimes that doesn't matter that much, and other times that's everything. And we get it wrong, and our lives are miserable for months because of it. So that's kind of the background here, and I'll finish this, sort of the problem piece of this, with just 3 numbers that relate to this. And the numbers are 55, 65, 90. 55, 65, 90. And what are these? This is data from McKinsey. This is percentages. 55%, this is the amount of information from a typical business meeting, professional context kind of thing, that is forgotten within an hour. Gone, poof. 65%, that's what's gone by the end of the day. And you see where I'm going with this. 90%, that is by the end of the week. When you think about this in light of today's reality, that someone has got to go and sort of retell our story to others for things to happen nowadays. And that meeting is not happening an hour after this meeting. It's happening a week or a day or a week or even longer afterwards. So we've got all these forces working against us here. And unfortunately, most communications fails pretty poorly, or fails here, and it fails catastrophically here. So what do we do about this? Well, this is the bottom half of the front page there. The key is to align with the human brain. I'll talk about what I mean by that. Arguably, there is no more important element in communication between two people than the human brain. And there's a really interesting point. We actually put it in bold for a reason there, but this is something I want you all to kind of catch in this moment. The human brain is not agnostic in terms of how it both wants and, in fact, needs to absorb information or to consume information. Right? Your brain sitting here right now is doing some very specific things with the information that's coming out of my mouth. And I'll explain what I mean by understanding and then aligning with these wants and needs. How many of you have had that moment? And it's good today, I don't have my name tag on, but most of you do. And I'm guessing most of you are very glad that everyone else has their name tag on because of a certain thing that happens. Let me just pick someone randomly. What's your name? Aaron? Aaron, Aaron, let's say Aaron and I are grabbing a drink after this, and my college roommate walks in. I'm like, Aaron, this is Phil, my college roommate, Phil, Aaron. And we start chatting. What happens 20 seconds into that conversation? She forgets Phil's name. And it's not just Aaron, it's all of us. I'm just picking on you because you're in the front, right? How many of you have had that moment where you meet someone and literally seconds later you're like, crap, what's their name? Like, I just heard it. They just said it. It wasn't like it was a weird name. It was a normal name, and it's gone. And it's not like, what's that restaurant we ate at last week, or who's that celebrity where if you dig around long enough in your brain, you're going to find it. This is gone. It's not there. You know, you could look for a week and you would never find it. And it's because the human brain doesn't have a filing folder for random information that comes in with no context. We just don't. Like, that information comes in, and the brain is a context engine. It is trying to make connections. And when that word fill comes into the brain and there's no context, no connection to anything she knows in advance, it rolls around for a few seconds and it almost literally falls out the other side of the brain. And it happens to all of us all the time. Which is bizarre, because if I dropped any one of you in the city that you've lived in most of your life, I could drop you anywhere in that city probably and say, you know, pick some landmark and say navigate from where I just dropped you to that landmark, and you could do it from memory. You've got entire city maps in your brain and you can't remember Phil you met 20 seconds ago. Like, what's going on there? It's because of how the brain works, or in this case doesn't work. As the brain loves context. It understands and learns things in context. And when you provide information to people without context, it falls out very quickly. And I'll give you a communications example of this. Last year we were at a conference. It was an internal company conference, and we had spoken in the afternoon, and our contact said, hey, stick around. The CEO is going to close the conference out, and he is phenomenal. We're like, great, we love good speakers. And so, lo and behold, 5 o'clock, CEO pops up on stage, and he's got 30 minutes. And he talks. He is, in fact, quite brilliant. He talks. He's got 30 minutes. He talks for 29 minutes and 45 seconds, like spot on. He is incredibly funny. His jokes are like right on the edge. You know, HR is in the back of the room going, can he say that? Did he say that? Oh my gosh, right? Legal's back there too, probably wondering. He knows people by name. He's calling them out and telling stories. And he doesn't slide bomb the audience. He's got one slide. And his slide was the 10 things that we have to get right this year. And he's up there and he's got the little Madonna microphone. He's got his $3,000 suit. He's got incredible eye contact. He's like a bald eagle out there. He's got body language of George Clooney striding across the stage. By every standard measure, he is phenomenal. And he goes through these 10 things, 1, 2, 3, just perfectly, like nailing each one. Wraps up and the audience goes wild. And clapping, applauding, standing ovation. MC comes up on the stage. He knows he can't top this. He says, thank you, everybody. Great conference. Drinks are out in the atrium. See you next year. Boom. People start to file out. And we're sitting there, and I will admit, we can be jerks sometimes. And we know what has just happened here. And our contact comes up to us, and it's like, hey, what'd you think? We're like, oh, it was good. But let me ask you a question. Your CEO just covered the 10 things you have to get right this year. How many of them do you remember? How many do you think he could name? I'm hearing it, right? 2. Right? You knew it wasn't 10 or even 8 or 5. That's fun. Like, this is your CEO, arguably a very important person in your organization, talking about the 10 things you have to get right this year, arguably an important topic, and he's got 20% recall in 2 minutes. Now, what happened there? It's because for all the things the CEO was doing by way of traditional presentation skills that were right, these 10 things, each one came with no context. There was no story here. There was no flow. Each one of these was basically fill, 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 right? In one ear and out the other. Except, 1 or 2 this guy happened to have a little context of his own for, and he was able to remember those. And it's funny, you'll go to see speakers now, and they'll do things like this, and you'll sit back and you're like, I know what's happening. I know I'm going to walk. This is great right now while I'm sitting here, and I know in 10 minutes after I walk out, you could quiz me, and I'd be like, I don't remember. So that's just one example of beginning to think about how does the brain actually work? How do we align with it, or in this case, fail to align with it? So let me actually talk about what does work. If this doesn't, if isolated acontextual information doesn't work for the brain, right? Details and data and facts that come in without context, what does the brain like? Turns out it really likes big ideas, or ideas in general. And in fact, all of you right now, you're listening to me, but you're looking for the ideas here. You're listening to the words that I'm saying, the stuff I draw, anything I might show on the screen, kind of reading the thing here, but you're going, what does this mean? What am I supposed to take away from this? Your brain is reductionist. And right now it is taking all this information and it is doing synthesis. It is synthesizing all this information into a set of ideas. And the brain loves ideas. These are what stick. And this, for me, for you, for anyone you ever speak to. And I'll demonstrate this in one of the most powerful ways I know. How many of you remember the O.J. Simpson trial? Few of you, okay. 7 months of mind-numbing testimony, detailed data, forensics from Marcia Clark and her prosecution team. All of that was destroyed by one phrase of 8 words that Johnny Cochran came up with. And you all know what it is on 3. 1, 2, 3. Okay. Just pause for a moment and recognize what just happened, right? That phrase, that trial was 24 years ago, almost a quarter century. And it was only uttered twice in the entire trial. And yet, sitting here now, and I bet none of you walked in here going, oh, I wonder if he's going to talk about the O.J. Simpson trial, right? You weren't thinking about that, and yet 30 seconds and full recall of that idea a quarter century later. Now, wouldn't it be amazing if your idea that you were trying to give to that government official, to that partner, to that potential donor, what if your idea stuck in their brain the way, if it doesn't fit, you must acquit sticks in yours? That's what we're shooting for. I want to understand, what are the big ideas that I need my audience to kind of get out of this, and then you build your presentation to drive those into their brain. And that leads to my first, and really today, only big idea, which is right there at the bottom of the page. The best communications, the best presentations, pitches, all seem to align to this idea, which is they powerfully land a small number of big ideas. They powerfully land a small number of big ideas. And you compare that to most presentations. You know, look at those 50-page bulleted PowerPoint decks, massive proposal decks, and you go, what is this doing? This is weakly landing a massive number of trivial ideas, most of which will be forgotten 20 minutes after I walk out of the room, and there's no retellability. So we are going to build our presentations. I hope all of you from here on out will make some attempt to go, well, what are my big ideas? And I'll tell you how you figure those out in just a minute. What are they, and how am I going to powerfully land them in this meeting? Which leads to a natural question, okay, how do I find my big ideas? How do I actually do this? And that, if you flip over the document, I'll give you just a vision of the future, and then we'll dive into a couple tools so you actually have something practical to walk out of here with. Now, what I'm about to talk about, it's captured in the paragraph at the top, but actually take a look at the blue image where it says professional life, and I'll actually show you this in full scale. This is a message that it was a 38-page bulleted PowerPoint deck. This is a sales example. You'll see the word customer on there, but it doesn't really matter that it's sales. This is a great example of effective, persuasive communication. And you see the 6 hallmarks around it. The first thing you note is it is clean and crisp and simple. This is a 1-hour conversation, and it's a single page. It's a little bit long, but still, it's a single page. You look at that, like, that's all the content for an entire hour-long conversation? Like, yeah, that's all you need. More than this, and you're starting to burn out people's circuits. So it's clean, it's crisp, it's simple. Second thing, and I'll talk about this more in detail later, is it is anchored in the audience's problem. I want to pause on this one for just a moment. How many of you saw Tara from MasterCard speak this morning? Quite a few, okay. Remember what she's saying, like, there's this kind of feeling of doom and gloom. We go in and we shame people, and we need to switch that. We need to paint a vision of the future. We need to show them the opportunity, right? And I will say, I agree with her in theory on some levels, but by beginning a message by talking about the fact that there is actually a real problem, and it needs to be solved, there's incredible power in that. And you can't just push that under the rug. And in fact, what for reasons I'll get into later, you want to put it up front and you want to linger on it. Now, where I want to make sure I'm not contradicting her, because she wasn't actually wrong, is you can't do it in a way that shames people. It says, you're an idiot, you're doing this wrong, you're stupid, right? You're a bad person. You can't do that. No shame, no blame. You do need to talk about the audience's problem in a way that is very understanding, that is like, hey, the world has changed. And what you have been doing, with the best of intentions, won't work anymore. You know, there's a number of different ways you can come at this. But you want to make sure there's no blame here and no shaming, but you also want to let them know that we can't afford to keep doing things the way we've been doing them. Something needs to change. So that's the second piece. Third, it pivots on a small number of powerful insights, aka big ideas. And I'll show you where those come from in just a moment. So you got your problem that we're going to solve, the big ideas that get into how you solve it. Those are the fourth point. These insights or big ideas, they are well supported with detail and data. You do have to have facts. You do have to have a logical, supporting argument. You can't just be assertions about these ideas. You have to prove them. So there's enough proof in here to support those. And then they're built into a logical sequence. How many of you have read a book at some point in your life? Okay, a few of you. Did you read that book in order? Chapter 1, Chapter 2, Chapter 3, Chapter 4, etc.? Yeah? Why? It's easier, right? That's how the book makes sense. Chapter 3 made sense because of what I read in Chapter 2. Chapter 2 made sense because of what I read in Chapter 1. And it's funny, it makes total sense to us when we think about books, and yet you look at most presentations and there's no logical flow. Or if there is a logical flow, it's completely the presenters. It's not the audiences. So the idea that each of these ideas is naturally flowing out of the one before, and the idea before is providing the context that you need to understand the next one. So there's a real story built into this. And finally, at the very bottom, there is a call to action. I'm not just going to assume you know what I want you to do. I'm actually going to put it on here. I'm going to say it out loud. I'm going to say, look, we just spent an hour talking through this. What do I want you to do differently because of it? I want you to, blah, blah, blah. Fund this, support this, join my team, partner with us, whatever it may be. So be explicit about the call to action. So those 6 hallmarks are how we see individuals, organizations powerfully land their small number of big ideas. Now there's just 2 boxes there, professional life and personal life. I won't go into the personal life one in detail. I'll just say that I can speak from real experience that if you apply some of this stuff, not just in your professional life, but in your personal life, it will make a tremendous difference. I am a happily married man now because of these tools. But I'll be clear, my wife is a happily married woman as well because of these tools. We both use these with some frequency. Stephen can vouch for that. But this stuff you will find there are certainly in your professional life many, many moments where this will come in handy, but the 2 or 3 times in your life where you apply it to personal presentations, those can actually be the more important ones, again, speaking from experience. So as I said, I wanted to get in just to give you a couple of tools to start to work on this, and you can see down there at the bottom the actual framework to think through this. And I'll go through this. What you see here is, and this is on your page, but a little bit bigger here, 3 sections. The right content, like how do we find our big ideas, make sure we're proving them, put into the right sequence, how do we turn those into a story, supported by the right engagement, or on your page I think it says retellability. How do I make it so it actually sticks in people's brains and they can repeat it to others later? Now again, I won't go through all of these, but I want to start with the first one, selection. I do want to, because this is important. This is, if you had that question in your brain of, okay, powerfully land a small number of big ideas. That makes sense. I get it intellectually. Where the heck do I get big ideas? What are these big ideas Eli's talking about? So I'll demonstrate the way to think about this. When you go into any or start to plan for any presentation, as I said a moment ago, you will want to know what is the problem your audience has, but that will be helped by them doing the thing you want them to do. What problem are you going to solve for them? And then what is the action or outcome that you are looking for them to take? That will, also if they do this, that will help them with the problem, but of course it's also what you want. Now that's good, but we all have a million problems. And we don't always take action to solve them, even if we know we could, because it's too expensive or it's too time consuming or we don't have the resources or whatever reason. We don't take the action that we know we should, and everyone else is exactly the same. They've got problems, they know they could do stuff to solve it, and they don't do it. So there's something else going on here. If we're thinking about driving people to take action, we have to understand something fundamental about humans. And I will demonstrate this through a little game with some real money at stake. $10, real money. Someone here will walk out of here with this $10, and hopefully it'll be someone in one of the front rows or in the aisle, so that's easy for me to get to. So I'm going to give you guys first dibs. The first hand I see will have the first chance. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to ask a very straightforward world geography trivia question. Very simple, especially with this kind of global focus of people in the room. I'm guessing the vast majority of you are going to know the answer. You're going to be good. You get it right, $10. For you, for real. You get it wrong, though, you got to pay me $2. So there is a cost to my deal, but I'll make it easy for you. You can phone a friend. You can look around. If you see someone else in the room sort of nodding and smiling, going, I know the answer, you can call on them, and if they're not screwing with you, if you get the answer right, great, you get the $10. And unfortunately, I only have a 10, Earlier today I had a 5 and some 1s, so that person split it with the people that helped him. But this time it's just a 10, so you get to keep it all yourself, so yay. So that's the deal. Straightforward world geography trivia question, $10 if you get it right, $2 to me if you get it wrong, but you can phone a friend. I will take the first hand I see. Oh, no one trusts me yet. All right, and what's your name? Udu. There are 5 oceans on planet Earth. Please name 4 of them. And you can talk through it out loud if you want. Atlantic. Pacific. And you can phone friends up. You got a friend there. You want to go for her for one more? All right. And Arctic. Nice. All right, well done. If you would, pass that back to our friend. You're all like, damn it, I should have raised my hand. So, Udu, now here's the interesting thing. It's worth $10 of my money to make this point for all of you, because it will be incredibly valuable. Why do human beings take action? The answer is, in human beings, action is preceded by belief. And catch that. In human beings, action is preceded by belief, meaning we take action based on what we believe. So Udu can answer this, but anyone can. She needed to believe 5 things in order for her to take the action I wanted her to take, which was raise her hand. What were the 5 things she needed to believe? Just shout them out. Okay, yeah, so I heard a couple. I heard one, that I'm actually going to give her the $10, which I did. I'm trustworthy, you'll find out. So 1, she had to believe I'd actually give her the money. 2, I heard over here that she actually had a decent chance of answering the question herself. What else? That people would help her if she didn't know all the answers. That this wasn't a trick question. I wasn't about to embarrass her in front of 200 of her closest friends. And the last one? So she believed she had the answer, was kind of that she could answer it, yep. What about the cost of the deal? Risk reward. She had to believe that she was willing, that $2 was a good amount to risk to win 10. She had to like the risk profile, the return on investment, if you want to call it. Right? Those 5 beliefs had to be in her brain. He's not tricking me. He's going to give me the money. I've got a good chance at the answer. Someone will help me if I don't know it, and I'm willing to risk the $2 in the worst case, right? And I'm guessing every single one of you in this room did not have at least one of those beliefs in your head, and that is why you all also took an action, which is to sit on your hands, metaphorically. You still made a decision. You still took an action of sorts. An inaction is still a choice. And it's because as human beings, as I said, action is preceded by belief. If I'd said, got a really difficult particle physics question, string theory, $10 if you get it right, 50 if you get it wrong to me, and no, you can't ask for help. Who's taking that bet? Nobody. Like Sheldon from the Big Bang Theory or something, right? Spock, I don't know. So, because in human beings, action is preceded by belief. In those cases, all of you are going, I don't know the answer, no one's going to help me, and I really don't like the risk profile, I'm out. Boom, keep my hands down. In human beings, action is preceded by belief. What that means then is if we want to drive action in our audience, this is the most important question you can now ever ask going into an important meeting where you're trying to drive someone to do something. The question is, what does my audience need to believe in order to take the action that I want them to take, right? What does my audience, when in this situation, these people or this person, what does that person need to believe in order to take the action that I want them to take? And those beliefs become your big ideas. So maybe they need to believe that this is going to be really good for their citizenry. Maybe they're going to need to believe that the other people who are part of the project are totally in support. Maybe they need to believe that they're not going to look stupid doing this thing you're asking them to do. What do they need to believe? Those become your big ideas that you're going to try and powerfully land. And then it becomes easy, because if belief drives action, the question is what drives belief, and the answer is knowledge. Right? You believe what you believe because of what you know, what you've read, what you've heard, what you've seen. All these combined experiences drive you to believe the things you believe. So this sort of bottom layer here, these are your proof points. And they might be data, they might be charts, they might be stories, they might be visuals, they might be case studies. Doesn't really matter. But the proof points drive each of the big ideas into your audience's brain, and when they have those big ideas and they go, yeah, I believe this, I believe this, I believe this. The action seems like the right idea. Going to solve my problem, and I move forward. It is that simple. Now, it's not that easy. Right? This is actually something that to do this well, you got to do it a number of times and start to figure it out. And it takes some thinking to go to really understand what really is my audience's problem, not what's my problem, what's their problem, and what do they really need to believe to get to do the thing I want. And I'll give you just a little one tip. More often than not, at least one, if not multiple, of these big ideas or these beliefs are just answers to their objections. Meaning, if you sit down before you go into that meeting or before you do that presentation or write your TED Talk or whatever it may be, you sit down and go, I know what I want these people to do. Why are they going to say no? They're going to say no because they don't believe it's good for their citizens. They're going to say no because they don't think other people are on board. They're going to say no because they think it's going to cost too much. That means I need to have an answer to those. So my first big idea is, no, this is going to be great for your citizenry. Or, everyone else is already on board. Or we're going to get people on board. Whatever it may be. So, make sense? Big ideas drive action, or big ideas, and those are the beliefs. This is where they come from. And the way you drive those beliefs is detail the data, the proof points. And this is great now because what you can do at this point is you can look at any piece of information you were considering putting into your pitch, right? Whether you're using PowerPoint or Keynote or something else. You can look at every single piece you're putting in, every content object, and you can go, will this drive one of those big ideas? Will this drive them to believe one of these things? And if the answer is, yeah, actually that's necessary for them to believe that second big idea, then great, it's in. And if you look at it and you go, they don't really need to know this to believe the stuff I need them to believe, toss it. And this is how you start to simplify. This is how you start to get down to what is absolutely critical in your message. Now, that's, as I said, this is where the big ideas come from and kind of how you start to architect the presentation. But I mentioned there are a couple other elements to this, right? So that's selection. Simplification is then how did you take this and begin to strip out anything that isn't absolutely critical? Because anything that isn't absolutely critical can end up being a distraction. It causes them to burn mental energy that is limited. So you want to, as much as you can, strip out the non-critical stuff. I'll leave that there. Sequence, number 3, I've actually already talked about, right? Reading a book, you read it chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3. Next time you build your next pitch, message, whatever it is, conversation, you've got your big ideas. Think about, well, what's the right, from my audience's point of view, which ones of these do they already have the most context for? That one goes first. They're going to get this one pretty quickly. And that one will set up the context for this next one. So you're very much looking for, how can I turn these ideas into a little bit more of a story? So they naturally flow for the audience, not for me. Because I understand them all. They're all crystal clear to me, but I'm the author. For my audience, this is the first time they're seeing these. I need to build them into a logical sequence. The question, though, that gets me to number 4 is, okay, if chapter 1 leads to chapter 2, chapter 2 leads to chapter 3, chapter 3 leads to chapter 4, et cetera, that's all great, but what leads to chapter 1? Where do I start? Because there is no chapter 0. So I'm walking into the room. Where do I begin my presentation, knowing that I need to start someplace where they have context? And the answer you already know. I've given it to you. It's we start with the audience's problem. Gently, respectfully, no blame or shame, but we need to start with their problem. And there's a reason for this. And I'll take this off because let me ask you a question. Would you say that in today's world, that you are and the people around you are over-communicated with? Do you agree that that is a fair statement? Absolutely. This is us, right? This is all of us every day. This is everyone we talk to. This is everyone we know, like information barrage, right? So here we are, you, me, our audiences, yay, happy day, but no, just massive amount of information coming at us day in, day out, and we're going, oh no, right? Hair on fire. That's us, but it's not just us, it's everybody. The numbers are staggering. As I said, it was some studies done in the 70s and 80s found that the average American was exposed to something like 500 to 600 sales and marketing messages a day. It's a lot. What do you think that number is today? Thousands. Right? They've proven at least 3,000, and there's credible research that show it might be as high as 5. 5,000 pieces of information coming at you every day. We are tremendously over-communicated. Now, we've gotten very good at something in this over-communicated world, right? With this barrage of information coming at us, what have we had to become good at? Filtering. We are very good at blocking all this stuff out. We've just built a barrier around ourselves, and most of this information is just bouncing off the barrier now. I won't make you do the math, but when we ask groups, when we have more time, and we say, how many things do you actually engage with in a day? How many Facebook posts do you actually read or watch the video? How many emails do you actually go through and thoughtfully respond? How many phone calls do you actually take? And you add those up, and the numbers we hear tend to be somewhere in the 100 to 200 range, which seems reasonable. But do you think if it's 100 to 200 out of 3,000 to 5,000, we're talking less than 5% of the information that comes at us we actually engage with. We are rejecting, ignoring, we don't even see it anymore, the vast majority of information that comes our way. And we like doing it. How many of you at one of the breaks today pulled out your phone, checked email, and saw some email that was like, oh, that's spam, that's not important, and you went and deleted it? Who did that today at some point? How did that feel? Satisfying. It's a good word for it, right? Yeah, because one less thing on my to-do list, one less thing I have to think about, one less thing I have to engage in. We love rejecting information. It makes us incredibly happy. So we are actively filtering, and so is our audience, whoever they may be. They're doing all this too. They're only letting 5% or 2% in at any given time. Now, that said, I mentioned they are letting that 2 to 3% in, so something is getting through our filter. Some information we let in. We do choose to engage with it. What does that information have to be? And there are different synonyms here, but what does that information have to be for us to decide I'm going to engage with it? Interesting, compelling, relevant, right? It's from my boss, it's from my wife, I'm really sad, and it's videos of kittens. Doesn't matter. In that moment, I have deemed it to be, I like the word relevant as kind of the catch-all phrase there. One reason or another, I've said this is relevant information to me at this moment. Now, I'll come back to that in just a moment, but just for the sake of argument, imagine you've gone in and you're presenting to someone, having a conversation, and you've lost them in the first 5 minutes. They've deemed what you're saying to not be relevant, and they've started to tune you out. What's the likelihood you're going to get them back? None. Not being provocative here, but I'm going to say no second chances. And that's because the brain science shows something called diagnosis bias, which is we make up our minds, we do it quite quickly, and we do not revisit our decisions. We can't. Again, with 3,000 things coming at us, we can't make a decision about it and then revisit it. That would suddenly make it 6,000 decisions we have to make, and our brain won't do that. So if you've lost someone in the first 5 minutes, 10 minutes later, you could be dancing on the table and they are not going to be engaged because they've already decided this isn't relevant and I'm tuned out. They're still nodding and smiling, but their brain's a million miles away. And you've all been on the other end of that. You've been the one nodding and smiling and not really listening to what's going on stage or across the table. What this tells us, again, this is another way the world has changed, right? We are over-communicated. 30, 40 years ago, this wasn't true. It is now. But what it means is that what we do in the first few minutes of any important communication is critical. We've got to get that right. And this is why you have to start with the problem. Because it is guaranteed to be relevant. It is guaranteed to get you through that filter. There is nothing more relevant to anybody, any of us, anyone we talk to, than our own problems. We love talking about our problems, be honest, right? We are self-centric. How many of you have been in a group photograph at some point? All of you, yeah? What's the first thing you look for when you get a copy of the photograph? Yourself, right? Are you a bad person for doing that? No, that's just human nature. We focus on ourselves first. And when someone comes in and they say, let me tell you a little bit about our history of our organization, let me tell you about us, our mission, our vision, our values, right? You are giving them a reason to go, oh, this is not relevant to me. So there's this feeling of, oh, we got to start with credentials. We got to show our credentials. No. The best thing that happens with credentials nowadays, because everyone's got credentials. You walk in, you share your credentials. The best thing that happens is, okay, fine, I'm going to park those. Show me what you got. But worse and now more likely is, oh man, here's someone who just likes talking about themselves. Click, tuned out. So the first thing that we get when you start with the problem, with their problem, and it's got to be theirs problem, not that oh, world hunger is a problem. That's not their problem. Their problem is how does world hunger, or whatever it is you're talking about, lack of technology in a developing space, whatever it may be, how does that affect them? Why is that bad for them? And you get it, and that's, again, it takes work to kind of figure that out. But once you got that, and you start to talk about that, A, you get engagement. They go, whoa, you didn't come in here like everybody else talking about yourself. You're talking about me. Like, okay, I like talking about me. Let's keep going here. Second thing is you actually build credibility. We think the credentials are the way we get credibility. No, as I said, not anymore. Credibility comes from you understand my world, and you actually understand a part of my world that's painful for me, and you're maybe proposing a way to solve that. That is credibility. So that's the second thing. And the third thing and final thing that it gets you, and final thing I'll talk about, is it actually drives people to action. One of the things, I'll go back to Tara's talk this morning, this idea of painting a vision of the future, this great opportunity we all have. Let's band together and get it done. Great. People will be somewhat more likely to take action when they see a vision of the future. But it is not the primary driver. I want to do a little experiment here. Picture your favorite musical artist. You're not going to need to share this with anyone, just in your own head. Who's your favorite musical artist? And it doesn't matter if they're alive or dead, the band can have split up. Picture them, and guess what? There is a one-time show. If they're dead, they're coming back to life. If friendships are mended, the band is together again. One-time show in your favorite venue, sold-out show, but there's one ticket left, and you've got a line on it, and you can get it. And do this for real. Do this for real. Real favorite artist, real favorite venue, one ticket. What would you be willing to pay to go to that show, to get that ticket? So put that number in your head. And again, do this for real. Really think of the number. What's the most you'd be willing to pay to go to that show? Good. Everyone got a number? All right. Congratulations, you got the ticket. Yay, life is good. 3 days before the show, your phone rings and you pick it up, number you don't recognize, but you answer anyway. And someone says, hey, this is Bob. You don't know me. I'm a total stranger. Sorry to bother you, but I hear you have a ticket to the show, and I really want to go. Please, please, please sell me your ticket. You're the only one. I've tried everybody else. You're the only one who might sell. Sell me your ticket. What would that person have to pay you for you to part with the ticket? Knowing that when you sell it to him, there's no more. You cannot get another. There is no going to the show. What is the least you would accept to part with that ticket to this guy, Bob? Come up with that number and put that in your head as well. All right. Raise your hand and keep it up. This is important. Keep it up if the second number is larger than the first number. Okay, keep them up. Keep them up if it is 2 times larger or more, 3 or more, 4 or more, 5 or more, 10 or more, 20 or more. All right. Still got a few like this. I want to, if it's like $1 billion, right? Infinity. But most of the hands go down in that 3 to 5 range, which perfectly aligns with the brain science here, which is that the human brain, and we are not rational beings, and this proves it, the human brain overweights avoiding loss more than it does hoping for gain, 3 to 5 times. In fact, I asked you the same question twice. What's the value of the ticket? Same question. But in one case, I phrased it as, you have an opportunity to gain it. And in the second, I phrased it as, you're at risk of losing it. But it's the same question. It's what's the value of the ticket? Should be a pretty solid number. Rational economists say, yeah, it's the same number minus some arbitrage fee. But behavioral economists, who actually know how the world works, say, no, no, no. Humans are not rational. The second number is going to be notably higher. Why do I cover this? Why do I finish on this? Because when you start with and linger on your audience's problem, you are actually 3 to 5 times more likely to drive the action you're looking for, to drive them to change, to try and solve that problem, than if you were to just focus on the opportunity. Now, here's the good news. Who says it has to be one or the other? Nobody. Can be both. The best thing is, let me show you the pain. Again, not your fault. You're not causing this, but you do need to do something about it. And let me paint that picture of the vision of the future of what it will look like when you get it right. And you can be the one responsible for that. Let me show you that. And when you do those 2 things together, that 1-2 punch, incredibly powerful. But don't miss that the only way you really get that is by setting up the problem early on. So with that, quick summary. As we said, most communications, we all communicate all the time. We don't always get what we want. We're not aligning with the brain. But if we do align with the brain, land some big ideas, people are much more likely to be able to retell and actually decide to do the thing we want to do. The way we do that, 6 hallmarks around aligning with the brain on the backside, and the structure for doing that. In particular, today we talked about finding your big ideas. They are what your audience needs to believe in order to think the action is a good idea. and making sure before you get into those big ideas, you really land that there's a problem. Thank you for the time. This has been awesome. Thank you, Stephen, for the intro. I'm sticking around for a while. If you have questions, great. At the bottom of the second page, there is a reference to our book, The Compelling Communicator. I have a dozen copies or so of it here. If you promise to read it, I will give you one. So your hand back there, all right. But you got to come up and grab them. So, all right, I'll save one for you, but anyone else, you got to come up. But if you want one and don't get it, it is available on Amazon. Please, it digs much deeper into everything I've talked about. Even tells the personal story about me and my wife, which is great. So thank you for the time. Happy to take any questions, but have a great rest of the day.